Mike Ostler's the name, and I currently live in Grays in Essex in my retirement. In fact, I'm so busy I wouldn't have time to do a full-time job anyway. But I've done some very interesting full-time jobs in my life. I went back recently, I retired recently from managing a 10-screen, multi-screen cinema. Prior to that, I was a manager at the Thameside Theatre in Grays. Prior to that, I was a stage manager in the West Country. I trained at the Bristol Long Vic Theatre School. A fellow student was one Jeremy Irons. I wonder whatever happened to him. I've probably worked more completely since then than he did, but never mind, good old Jeremy. Prior to that, I had been in the Royal Air Force for 12 years. And the thing that I used to do for 12 years was search and rescue, basically, with the Shackletons.
Developed from the Lancaster, the Shackleton was built for a different war, the Cold War, in which watching and listening replaced fighting and dying. Devastating surprise air attacks like the Japanese strike on Pearl Harbor had convinced military strategists of the need for eyes in the sky. From 1951, the Shackleton was the RAF's flying radar station, patrolling British waters in search of intruders above and below the sea. But in the age of Star Wars and Exocets and automated war, this machine belongs to an era when operators did more than press the button.
In the Royal Air Force, I served from 1956 to 1968. During that 12 years, I spent most of the time with the Shackletons on search and rescue, particularly. I flew from Kinloss in the north of Scotland, and from Aldergrove in Northern Ireland, and from St Morgan in Cornwall, where I believe there's an interesting Shackleton left as a permanent memorial, if you like. I think they call them Gate Guardian.
Ignition, dead object, flaps, check 1 indicating. Visually from the rear, restrictors working, one bars, toast black, engineers checks, complete, after starts complete.
Now St Morgan is now, I think, Newquay International Airport or something. It's not exactly an RAF base anymore. And also in the Far East, I did 2 tours in the Far East based in Singapore, which was much more interesting from the search and rescue point of view, much more trying, because we covered in those days 1/3 of the world's surface from the one base in Singapore.
What were your years in Singapore?
60 to 62, and got married, and then 65 to 68, I was there to sort of finish the confrontation with Indonesia, which wasn't search and rescue. That was slightly different, but clearly we did some operational trips as well. I was trained at Kinloss onto Shackletons. And then from there I joined 120 Squadron that was at Aldergrove in Northern Ireland. And they said, could we, we were going to move the squadron back to Kinloss. So we upped, after a few months, we upped and we went back to Kinloss. Now my role in those crews was air electronics officer. And what happened was the Shackleton had a crew of 10. You had 2 pilots driving it, an engineer watching the dials and checking the fuel and all those other technical things, 2 navigators, and then the 5 of us down the back were the electronic team. So there would be myself plus 4 others, and we would be responsible for all the things that the aircraft did, which included the radio, so we'd send Morse messages, the radar, so that we could see where we are. Whatever the navigator said, we knew with the radar on what was going on. We would do the lookouts, looking out port beam and starboard beam in case we were searching for a visual target, like a dinghy or a sinking fishing boat, whatever. We did the radar, and we would be looking out and around, so we knew where we were. Whatever the navigators said, we could check that the coastline was just there, coming up any time soon, you know. So from that, and then down the back of the aircraft, we had lookout positions. We could take camera shots of passing Russian submarines or anything else of interest. But if we were on search and rescue, clearly we'd be looking out for visual target, a dinghy or a sinking boat, and then we'd take pictures afterwards, incidentally, but that's what we'd be looking for. And we would have large dinghy packs in the bomb bay, so if we were on a search and rescue mission, we wouldn't be dropping bombs or depth charges, we'd be dropping dinghies by the survivors. So this last time that the gun turret was used in earnest, to my knowledge, was on the Shackleton. We had a nose turret with 2 cannons, 30mm Hispano-Suizo cannons, and we were set out to locate and help arrest these pirates from the Philippines who would come over in what looked like a little fishing boat from the Philippines to the eastern side of Borneo. They realised the Royal Navy was a bit thin on the ground out there. The Royal Malaysian Navy had only just started, and so the Royal Navy was not too strong there. They were getting less and less. Royal Malaysian Navy was taking over with a few Vosper speedboats, patrol boats, but they couldn't protect the whole coast of Sabah, which it then became, and later on became, eastern Malaysia. But at that time, the little villages or kampongs along the coast were vulnerable to these pirates coming in. The pirates would land, they would kill the policeman, steal his armaments, steal outboard motors, steal fuel, and anyone got in their way got shot, and off they would go back again. Now, how could we catch them? Well, they looked like a fishing boat, but the moment you flew away, they would up their speed with about 12 outboard motors stuck out the back, and they would really zoom across, but when you flew back, they'd disappear amongst any passing fishing boats, and you would never know where they were. But I had a method, and we sussed them out with our radar and a Chinagraph pencil. So we'd fly around the fishing fleet, and I would mark 12 dots for the boats. Then we would fly over the horizon, and I'd keep tracking the dots, and one of the dots would be zooming across at a great rate of knots. So we would then fly round and home in on my fast-moving dot on the radar, and they would never know how we spotted them amongst any other boats, because they were really moving then. The moment they heard us coming, they cut the speed and pretended to be a fishing boat. So what we do, we fly round them, calling the radio in either a Navy frigate or Royal Navy frigate or a Malaysian patrol boat, in my case a patrol boat. So we still had to slow them down a bit. So the skipper said, right, we'll fly round and we'll shoot across their bow and they'll get the message. So I'm up there in the turret and we fly round, safe path to fire. So we move the button and we fly past and we go bum 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 bum. Lots of lovely splashing in front of them. They don't take a blind bit of notice. So we come round again and the skipper says, right, a little closer this time, Mike, he said. So I said, okay. And they still didn't stop. By then they knew the game was up. They were going up to speed. So we said, right, this time, he said, I want to see a few splinters. So we came round again and I just started, boom, boom. They cut the engines and stopped. They realised that we were getting that close. So they stopped, and of course, while all our noise that we're flying around with our engine noise, they're not hearing the patrol boat coming up behind them. So all of a sudden, they've got Malaysian police on board, with, I think they had a British officer in those days. And so it's all hands up, and they were taken in ashore presumably popped into jail and threw away the key for their crimes.